Alright, I finished this book today, Blood on Her Tongue by Johanna Van Veen. I should have actually given the title on my last book review. Anyway, short version, should you read it? If you like gothic horror, probably yes. And it's set in the 19th century. I think that's probably all you need to know. Gothic horror in the 19th century. If you're into that, I think it's a good one. Let me read the blurb and then we will get into some details. So, you know, there's a testimonial, a quote from the book, which kind of... the quote is very much taken out of context, but I can see why they used it. They're trying to sell the thing. Okay, the blurb itself, though. So it's the Netherlands, 1887. Lucy's twin sister Sarah is unwell. She refuses to eat, mumbles nonsensically, like me, and is increasingly obsessed with a centuries-old corpse recently discovered on her husband's grand estate. The doctor has diagnosed her with temporary insanity caused by a fever of the brain. To protect her twin from a terrible fate in a lunatic asylum, Lucy must unravel the mystery surrounding her sister's condition, but it's clear her twin is hiding something. Then again, Lucy is harboring secrets of her own too. Then the worst happens. Sarah's behavior takes a turn for the strange. She becomes angry, ... and hungry. Lucy soon comes to suspect that something is trying to possess her beloved sister, or is it madness? As Sarah changes before her very eyes, Lucy must reckon with the dark, monstrous truth, or risk losing her forever. So, that's the vibe. Blood on her tongue. The quote they picked is, "I'm in your blood and you were in mine." Don't worry about that quote. I mean, like, I don't want to give up too much away. Okay, so, some thoughts. First of all, choosing this book, okay, it sounds like, you know, I was into vampire stuff a while back. OG viewers will know all about that. So, you know, reading that, I'm like, oh, it sounds like a mystery. Pretty cool. So, yeah, I chose, you know, I was reading it when I was trying to choose books. I was there with a friend, and I was just trying to, I think I might even have given it to him to check. Because I have previously had two books. One was like the book that was all like gay romance and it got really hardcore and was too much. And then there was the Court of Thorns and Roses one, which was like straight furries. So I had gay furries and then straight furries, kind of, not really, but you know, like too much romance and so on for me. So, you know, I think I might have given it to him to look at, just to be like, hey, does this sound safe? And then I also read through the testimonials where it's like praise. I didn't read enough of them though, because the very last one is where it finally reveals that it's queer gothic fiction, and I became a little bit scared. Because, you know, I consider myself to be asexual. Whether things are accurate, given that I've dated and given that I have schizoid personality disorder, and is it actually just the disorder, or is that, I mean, at this point it's so set in that it's probably just me, but I do concede that the disorder is probably part of it. But yeah, I have been around, you know, queer spaces, and they say they're inclusive of ace, but then, I mean, they'll include you, but they still talk about the complete opposite constantly, and that's just the thing that I'm like, oh no, is it gonna be like heaps of gay romance in this? No, it was surprisingly, there is a little bit, but it's not like the gay werewolf book, which was written by a dude who calls himself Ace, but like the stuff he's writing and his representation of like the one Ace character in the book, I was like, really? Are you sure, mate? Whereas this, okay, it focuses on the story. And the few parts that do have romance bullshit, they actually like feed into the story in a way that makes sense. You know, because like you can't stop people having their romances and putting it into stories, but if you're going to do it, make it contribute to the story in some way. Like, don't just throw it in my face just because you wanted to get off, which is what I think the gay werewolf guy was kind of doing. Yeah, so, you know, when it comes to movies, I think Vanilla Sky was one of the few movies where I'm like, okay, fine, the sex scene in this makes sense. So yeah, it's kind of like that. And it does have, you know, lesbian stuff in there, but it's so minor, and actually there's a lot more focus on the straight romances, which surprised me. But for the most part, it focuses on the horror, and these are side issues that do contribute to the story, but they're not like a key focus in the way that I'm making it a key focus right here. Whoops. But yeah, no, so it focuses on the horror. I like that. Now, in terms of the horror is very... it's quite full on, it gets quite gory. If you're squeamish, you may not want to read too much. So there's that. Like, this author does not shy away from going all in on the okay, oh wow, and then, like, you know, a few chapters later, oh shit, and then a few chapters later, oh god. It's just like, yeah, it'll settle down for a bit and go into more of a mystery, and then it'll get gory again, and I think it's quite well balanced in the way it does that, you know, story, gore, horror, mystery. Like, it's all woven together quite well. So yeah, and like the mystery is well done. How much? So they mention the how did they describe it? Because I don't want to give away too much, because I think this is one that's worth reading if you're into this genre or just curious about this kind of thing. Yeah, they found a centuries-old corpse. I like the way that they chose and the form of the corpse they chose, because it's just something that doesn't come up a lot, but it's one of those things that I remember being kind of fascinated with a long time ago, but not to the level that this takes it, and this kind of like takes the mystery of that type of corpse and adds to it, and it's just like, yeah. Also, I enjoyed the language of that sort of 19th century. Now, I was a bit confused in the sense that it's set in the Netherlands, and early on, the main character is talking about having Gothic novels translated from English that she was reading. I'm pretty sure it's translated from English. So what confused me is, like, am I meant to read this? It's in English, the book. Am I meant to read it as if all the characters are speaking English, or am I meant to read it as if they're speaking Dutch? Dutch is the language of the Netherlands, right? I just wasn't sure about that. That was one thing that was a little bit unclear, a bit of a nitpick. Doesn't really matter if you just want to enjoy the story, but it was one of those things that I was like, what am I supposed to be thinking here? Minor point. But, like, you know, there's parts where I think there was like a limerick or something, and I'm like, okay, that kind of works in English, but would it have worked in Dutch? I'm not sure. Yeah, so there's little things like that. But yeah, no, the setting, like the language they use, at least is from what I stand of, like, English speaking, you know, 19th century aristocrats and, you know, the hierarchy and all that. The language makes sense, and I think it's kind of changed the language that I have been thinking in as I've been reading it. And I was a little bit worried I would come here and be going all like, alas. Yeah, there were a few things I had to look up because I wasn't sure. But yeah, no, this author, I think, there's a part at the end, I did read the end that was about the author, and it sounds like she's done a lot of historical research, and she's also actually grew up in the Netherlands. Now, it says grew up in, doesn't mean she was necessarily born there, I don't know, but I'm sure she knows. Oh, like, you know, I'm just like, I was just a bit skeptical at first, and then I'm like, oh, okay, she's actually from there, so she must know what she's talking about. Oh, there's some, I don't know if I should just jump to this, but there's some interesting stuff. Like, there's a reading group guide, and I'm like, I wish we had this sort of a book for the HSC English when I was at school, instead of, like, if you're gonna read 19th century stuff about the hierarchy and, like, the misogyny of the era and the classism and all that, if you're gonna have to have that on a syllabus, I would rather read this than Emma and Clueless, which is what I had to study for the HSC. Oh, God. No wonder I was struggling in English. But this stuff, this one, like, you know, with that reading guide, I can actually see how you could use this for a class. Now, I went to a Catholic private school. I don't think they would approve, because gore, and, you know, even the lesbian stuff aside, the straight romance stuff's probably not appropriate for a good little Catholic girl. But I would have enjoyed this much more. And there are like a lot of conversations here. Like, these are good questions for a class to, you know, I can see it as a thing. And then, yeah, conversation with the author, that was actually kind of interesting to read. Yeah, anyway, and then there's acknowledgements. Okay, so in terms of the way that the book is written, the chapters are shorter than the last book I read, which was Dreadful. So it's easier to like just read it in chunks. There are a few chapters that have some pretty epic cliffhangers though, and so I was reading at times 2 or 3 chapters a day once I really got into it. Also, this is one of those books that has letters in it. Like, it's got the chapters written as prose, but then there are letters. Apparently some people have studied Jekyll and Hyde for the different formats that make up the book. I was never part of that, but if that's a thing for studying, it does the letters thing, and some of the letters are quite different. And yeah, and then there's also a couple of newspaper articles. If you are reading this and you get to the end of a chapter and it starts on a letter, I would recommend reading the letter until you get up to the next thing that actually says chapter whatever number. Because like it kind of I didn't realize that at first, and so like I'd maybe read a letter and then sort of stop, or like not, or get to the end of a chapter and not read the letter until my next session. And after a while I picked up, no, you should read the letter as like the final part of the chapter if you're trying to do it in chapter chunks. I think it works better for the flow of the story. So there's that. Yeah, and then there's so much action. There's just like, there wasn't any point in this book where I was bored. And okay, in terms of criticisms, like, it's mostly a pretty solid book. I do think it could have benefited from a little bit more editing, nitpicky stuff. I don't know, it could be me, it could be my interpretation, because there have been days where I've been a little bit out of it, a little bit migrainey, so maybe my memory has not been quite great. But there are a few points in here where, you know, something will be written referencing a prior event, and I'm like, that definitely didn't happen, or it didn't happen that way. So like there's one where one of the characters gets like a pin in her hand, but then a few pages later a different character is worrying about some you know, scratch or scrape on their hand, and I'm like, pretty sure that happens to the other character, and I don't recall any point where that could have happened to you also. I'm pretty sure it was your finger that got pricked and not the back of your hand. So there's like little bits like that where you're just like, wait a minute. And then there are other things where I'm like flipping back, like, really, what was that said? So I don't know if that's my memory being faulty or an editing issue, or potentially a writing issue where they mentioned it so long ago as such a minor detail that you're just like, hang on, was that a thing? Or, you know, like, I don't know if they left it too long, or if it's just like their way of adding a detail instead of being repetitive. They're like, oh yeah, sort of, by the way, this happened, but without, like, you know, referencing it as something that you might already know. There was just a few minor confusing things in there, and I'm not entirely sure if it's just, I don't think it's just me, because, you know, other books I've read, I haven't had that kind of an issue, and this one seemed to have a few more. It's a little bit nitpicky, and I just found it kind of amusing because so like after all the testimonials and the cover page and the dedication, there is an author's note, and the note is kind of funny. It's sort of like, yeah, this is horror, you might get upset, and I'm like, no shit. And apparently she made use of a sensitivity reader. I'm like, okay, do you really need a sensitivity reader for a gory horror book? I just can't imagine what a sensitivity reader would be looking for to avoid upsetting anyone. Because like this, it goes into some pretty heavy shit. Like, there is a lot of misogyny, there's also like the treatment of the mentally ill, and it's just like we know that was the 90s, that was hundreds of years ago, like, we get it. It doesn't mean that you're advocating for that. And even also at the end, when, like, you know, she's being interviewed or a conversation with the author, there is a point where, like, they talk about how in the past being gay, especially as a woman, was like, you would be considered to be insane. Being gay was a form of insanity. And she even makes the point herself that if we didn't have such a stigma about mental illness, it wouldn't be such a problem to equate being gay with being insane. Whereas other people, especially these days, they're like, oh no, we have to separate these concepts. Like, you can't, you see it in, like, some of the gender stuff as well. It's like, oh no, we can't say that, gender dysphoria is a disorder. Like, we can't even call it gender identity disorder anymore. We can't call it that. No, it's not a disorder. Even though it causes people so much distress. And then same with autism. Oh, no, it's not a disorder. It's just a different way of thinking, even though, especially with severe cases, it causes people quite a lot of distress. And it's like, if we didn't have that stigma, the word disorder wouldn't be a problem, and we could call things what they are and give it the seriousness. And I mean, I've gone on a bit of a rant. Being gay is not quite as serious as having, issues like that. Plenty of gay people get on, actually most gay people get on quite happily. So it's a different kind of issue. But, like, her point is, like, it wouldn't be such an issue to equate the two things if we didn't stigmatize mental illness in the first place. And I gotta say, with some of these things where they're trying to stop things, I'm on a rant, I'm sorry, but these conditions where they're trying to say, oh no, we're not a disorder, they don't realize that they're adding to the stigma of disorders and mental illness, because they're like, oh no, we're not that. We couldn't possibly be that. And so they're putting down that to try and take themselves out of the stigma. And it's just like, how about we just get rid of the stigma altogether? Anyway, never mind, I've just gone on a rant. Yeah, and she mentioned something as well, like, writing about something, especially historically, doesn't mean that you endorse that. It's just like, it's just how things work. So actually, I like this author's approach, especially reading that at the end, and, like, the way that she's approached the story. It doesn't beat around the bush about how life was in the past, and it doesn't beat around the bush around the horror. So yeah, like, that's some fun stuff. Sensitivity reader, I don't know what was necessary. I think, like, there was an editor as well. I think they just needed to put a bit more into making sure the things written stayed slightly more consistent, but they are minor points. It's just like, wait a minute, did I miss something? Did I have any more thoughts about it? Without giving spoilers, yes, there is a dog in there. And, well, importantly, the dog lives. It does go through a bit, but not too bad. It's kind of heroic in a way. And then you just kind of don't find out anything else. So I assume the dog is fine, and I will believe that the dog is fine, and things go in a way that suggest that the dog is fine. Also there's 3 separate parts that sort of separate the 3 phases of the story. So it's kind of like the mystery part. It's sort of the illness part, and then there's more of a mystery part, and then there's the more, like, shit hitting the fan part. Trying not to say too much. But yeah, no, there's a lot of gore, so... Oh, wow. Yeah, no, and I read this in a pretty decent chunk. Is there anything else to say? I need to have, like, a checklist of what do I talk about when I'm doing a book review. I think it's a good book. Don't let if you're someone who's nervous about queer authorship stuff, like, it doesn't come across as that. It's very successful in being like, oh, and these characters happen to be gay, and it has a minor, like, it has relevance to the story without being over the top. I think that's how things should be done, and it has that realistic view of history, at least as far as I understand it. And then, like, yeah, there's some cool, like, that centuries-old corpse, as they describe it. And then attitudes to medicine, like the things that they used to believe and the things that they didn't understand about medicine. It's, like, quite immersive. They've created quite a good picture of, life back when. Yeah, I think that might be it. I think if you like gothic horror and you can stand a bit of gore, it's a good one. And yeah, that 19th century. And then if you're looking for a book to study in like a, what did they say, like a reading group or something? Reading group guide. Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to say. There's, there are some cool questions about identity and memory. And this is the thing for me that I wasn't expecting to get out of it. Like, on the back, it's kind of just like, oh, some mysterious illness, and then it's implying that, you know, she becomes angry and hungry, and, what it doesn't tell you on the blurb is it does go into identity, what makes you who you are, memories, some very interesting questions. There's also sibling dynamics, which I don't think I really find relatable, but some of you might, like really strong sibling dynamics. The way there is a little bit of like exploitation, there's a bit of trauma, I think. Trauma in some ways, yeah. Like it's not full on. I feel like Dreadful had a bit more of an exploration of trauma. I feel like trauma was a bit more relevant to that story. Like this one has a bit. It sort of influences some of the dynamics, but so identity, sister dynamics, and what was the other thing? There was something else I was... There's a problem with getting sidetracked. Shit, I can't remember. And I don't want to have to edit this video because I've been doing enough editing as it is. The questions of identity are fun. Because if you can't... Oh, I shouldn't say too much. It's kind of interesting though. Questions of memory, because Dreadful had questions of memory as well. And so, yeah, I guess that's 2 books in a row for me where it questions like, who are you? What makes a person? And, you know, if certain things happen, are you still the same person? And how much can you change before you're a different person? There's some fun stuff in there. Is there duality stuff in this? Sort of, but not in the way that you would expect. Like that, it does break some expectations, I think, of where you think it's gonna go and how you think characters are gonna relate. That's the other thing. So with the straight relationships in particular, and I think maybe the 2 main male characters. So with those dynamics, I can see a little bit of my ex in some of the characters and the way that they behave. And, like, that's another thing that got me is, like, this is all like, oh, queer gothic horror, which I think it's just gothic horror. It doesn't... you don't have to single this out as being queer, and I don't think we necessarily... Yes, the author might be queer, and there might be queer characters in it, but is this a super queer novel? No. And one of the things that I think adds to that is, like, you know, you don't have to pigeonhole this into queer the way that Ravensong was definitely super gay. And I think the whole world of that book, like that was the second book that I didn't realize was the second book, so I jumped in at a weird spot. But as I understand it, I think all the books center on gay characters in that, which is just statistically unlikely for the size of the town they describe. But anyway, no, one thing that makes this feel more like a story in its own right without having to be labeled queer is the straight relationships. I'm just like, I have seen this. I have been around at least one dude who did some of the things that these 2 guys do, and it's like, I like what happens to them. Just saying. So there's some, like, toxic relationships in there, and the way that they're dealt with, I felt, was rather satisfying. It's frustrating at times, but it's good in the end. Now, I guess you could be like, oh, but so the gay relationships were good. But, like, there's a sort of more tragic gay relationship earlier on, and then there's one that, like, I don't even know if you could call the other one, like, a sweet one because it's kind of fucked up in its own way. Like there's no relationship in this that comes out unscathed, I have to say. Yeah, and then yeah, no, it's a good read. So I can see that it's not for everyone because, like, I was telling my mum how I finished a book, and then the moment I said horror, she's like, because she doesn't like horror. She likes, crime and lawyers and so on. So yeah, this is not the sort of book I would recommend to my mum. Whereas my mum might find the wizard one entertaining. It's still not quite her thing, but at least she's not gonna run away the way she would if she tried to read this. So, yeah. You have to be into this genre. But if you are into this genre, I would definitely recommend it. And I'm gonna say, like, as far as the, like, queer author thing goes, this is probably my favorite book by a queer author, an openly queer author that I've read so far. Doesn't say much because I haven't paid attention to that sort of thing in the past. It's only because of that bloody Raven song, gay werewolf furry porn book, that I'm now like, oh shit, I should probably be a bit more careful. Because yeah, being in the music scene, I did play some it was just called Chicks with Pics, and it was meant to be like a women's showcase, but eventually I realized, oh yeah, they are going for a little bit more of a lesbian thing, and my band was called Rainbow Death Ray, and I picked the rainbow thing because I thought, oh, it's like kind of feminine without being pink, and it just never occurred to me that it would be taken as an LGBT thing. But I guess we were accidentally LGBT because I was ace. We had, I think, early on, at least one chick who was straight and another one who was bi and another one, I think, gay. I'm not even sure. I think everyone's sort of all over the place. Yeah, but I think we had kind of like the full mix across the members that we had, even from the start. Even the members who never performed was sort of accidentally LGBT, and that's me. I just do things accidentally. I'm not trying to advocate for anything. It's just like, whoopsie doop. Yeah, that's actually kind of funny. Anyway, in those spaces, and then when I started doing solo, I played a few solo shows at the same thing, and I would always notice, like, a lot of the other performers would bring up queer stuff, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's nice, but not really, like, if you go to a venue or something that isn't gay, they tend to just do music. You might get the occasional romance thing, but it's not as big a deal. So yeah, that made me a little bit nervous, but I like this chick. So currently my favorite gay author, in part because she did it tastefully, without taking over the whole thing, without having an agenda. I mean, like a lot of it's okay to have a message in a story, and this has like plenty that you could dissect in it, but it's done in a way where the story is the main thing, and then everything else is just stuff to think about without being in your face. So yeah, cool stuff. And gosh, it's such a journey, and like, yeah, wow. It's just constantly like, what's going to happen next? What the hell is going on? What's this mystery? What are we going to find out next? What gore is this? And yeah, it's a good book. Well done book. I would recommend it unless you are very squeamish. I think that's all I've got to say there. So, by the way, just in case it takes me a while, today is the 25th of January 2026. I have decided I need to start mentioning the date just in case, because I am still trying to catch up with my video life. And I don't know, like, in the future, people who come on this completely randomly instead of people who come onto it like right after upload. This is my world in 2026. Blood on her tongue. Bye.